Welcome, everyone. If we will get started with our June 4th meeting of the Kokomo Board of Zoning Appeals with our Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. So if you will join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We'll get started with a reminder. If you have a cell phone with you, could you please turn it to silent or just switch it off? It looks like we've got a little bit of a crowd here this evening. Please do know that everyone will have an opportunity to speak to the cases that come before us this evening. We want that to be as orderly as possible. The whole point of this board is to gather information and make an informed decision, and so we want to hear from as many people and as much relevant information as we can as we move forward. Though I would ask, as you do have an opportunity to speak, please come forward and talk if you have something additional to add to what's already been said. Again, this is an information gathering board. If we've heard that information once, we have noted it and we're considering it, and we'll make a decision based on that. But just for the purpose of efficiency, we'll make sure that we add a unique voice to the comments when you do come forward, if you do come forward. So we will get started with a review of our May 7th minutes. Take a moment or two to look those over. And once we've had a chance to do that, we'll entertain a motion to approve the May 7th, 2019 Board of Zoning Appeals minutes.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as printed.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded? Approved.
Make sure you have everybody vote. They all have to vote.
Oh, sorry. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Approved. A little hasty there. We'll start with our first case, case 3V19.
Yes, the petition of Melissa Dominguez requesting a variance to section 6.9 AS-01E accessory structure standards to allow a detached garage in front of the primary structure at 2222 South Wabash Avenue.
Do we have a motion related to case 3V19?
I move that we approve the case 3V19 and adopt the findings of petitioner of the board and the findings part of the record.
A second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Has there been any ex parte communication related to case 3V19?
No.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make it order. I do live in that neighborhood, and I have spoke to some neighbors. I wouldn't call, nobody swayed my vote or anything like that. They asked me what the procedure is on how it goes, and I explained it to them. That was the extent of it. But I did have some conversations with some neighbors.
Okay. Duly noted. Thank you. Would our petitioner come forward, Melissa? Melissa, would you say your full name and your address, and just give us a brief overview of what you're here asking us to
Sure.
do?
Melissa Dominguez, address 2222 South Wabash Avenue. I actually put the garage, what I thought was on the side of the house, and I realize that it's against ordinance. It's in the front of the house. I live in a property that, I guess you have it there, has kind of 3 front yards, so it kind of makes it hard. I just have a kind of a rusted old vehicle I was trying to cover up, and I thought the garage looked better than the vehicle. And the only place to move it is kind of to the left side of the house, which would put it close to my neighbors, but I did check with Greg and his team, and It would be far enough away from my house and far enough away from the property line, but I think it would be way more visible than it is now. It's pretty covered by bushes and things right now.
Any initial questions related to that description? If you don't have any, I think we'll ask you to briefly read, or read rather, the petitioner's findings of fact.
Oh, I didn't bring that.
Here we go, Melissa.
Mrs. Barlow.
Okay, my answer is there. Yeah, so it says the current placement of the detached garage is not injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. In fact, I think it looks better where it currently is than if I have to move it to the side yard, which is where I was talking about the left side of the house. I don't believe the adjacent property included in the variance is substantially affected in adverse manner where the garage is now. If I have to move it to the side yard, I think the adjacent property would have a problem with it, even though it would be within the guidelines of the ordinance.
Okay.
With my lot technically having 3 front yards, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but
Yeah, you're fine.
okay, since 3 sides of the lot are street facing, the only place to move the garage is to the left of my house when looking at the house from the front. This puts it in the grass, and I will have to drive through the grass, which, by the way, I found out that was against ordinance, so I realized it's not an option. With the vehicle being stored in there, also, if it is placed on the left side of my house, I think the appearance of it will actually be worse than where it is now. Overall, it's different with the lot on the house that, where it sits now.
Are there any questions related to the petitioner's findings of fact or for the petitioner? Thank you, Melissa. We will move on to our staff findings of fact.
Yeah, staff findings for case 3V19, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. Granting this variance will not create any safety hazards or allow the petitioner to encroach on any recorded easements, setbacks, or property lines. The use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Granting the variance would have little or no effect on the surrounding area, as others in this residential neighborhood have both attached and detached garage as well as similar accessory structures. The garage itself is partially concealed from the street by landscaping, and the exterior is similar to that of the home on the property at the end of an existing paved driveway. The strict application of the terms of this zoning ordinance will result in a practical difficulty. This situation shall not be self-imposed nor be based on a perceived reduction of or restriction of economic gain. As the petitioner has a corner lot located on the bend where Wabash Avenue and Grove Avenue meet, she has 3 front yards as designed by the City of Kokomo zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance states that no accessory structures may be placed in a front yard, leaving the petitioner with only 1 elevation to build on. This area is in the corner of the lot where there is no driveway or alley access, so the petitioner would have to either put a drive through her yard or pay to have another drive put in. The shape and placement of the lot create a practical difficulty for the petitioner that would negate her ability to utilize her property as she desires.
Are there any questions related to the staff's findings of fact?
So, Mr. Sheeline, where the structure is legally permissible is when I'm looking eastbound from Wabash. It's between the home and the house to the north, correct? And that's really the only spot that it would be permissible because of the design or the location of this property, or having the 3 sides. The other 3 sides would be considered front yards.
Yeah,
since they
and
face the
even that's
street.
not ideal. No matter where you put the structure, the way this lot is situated, it's going to be seen. But yes, that is the best location for it according to the ordinance.
Okay. That was kind of just a point of clarification. Thank you.
Are there any other questions related to the staff findings of fact?
I got a couple things like we have a lot of cases where people live on a corner, and we understand that they basically have 2 front yards. Every other case that I can remember, it's because they wanted to develop their side yard, not their front yard. This garage is literally sitting in the front yard, probably 12 feet from the street. Whereas, always before, if it, we'd say if it was going off of Grove or something and you want to give them variance off of Grove or off of a side street, we do that.
Correct? Correct, yes. That's how it normally is. Unfortunately, as we just said, the way this lot is located,
No, well,
it's technically three front yards. So it's not, we're not dealing with 2 front yards, unfortunately, we're dealing with 3, which makes it a little bit more difficult.
technically, it's a lot of the neighborhood, it's almost 1 acre. There's
Correct.
almost 1 acre of land there.
Correct.
This street right up here goes to a four-way
You got 1 acre land, you have to put a garage in the front yard, I don't understand.
Okay.
on and take right to the Coconut Country Club. So we come in.
But it's here currently.
Any other questions?
And we're telling her where it has to go.
Here's where it is. Here.
Oh, it's here, and we're telling her it has to go in here.
That's the one spot where it's allowed, because you can see front yard on the
Yeah.
street, front yard, so.
Any point of clarification or anything?
No, I'm good.
I'm clarified.
Okay. All right, we'll open up this to the audience. If anyone would like to speak to this case or this situation, please come forward. Please state your name and address for the record, and proceed.
Hi, I'm Matt McKillop. I live at 2331 South Wabash Avenue, about a block south of this property. And, for a good 16 years, many city leaders, including you, have worked hard to improve the quality of life. And a big part of that is the way the town looks and our neighborhoods look. And zoning's a big chunk of that, to make sure that our home values don't depreciate and people want to move here. I've not had a chance to speak with all of my neighbors, but I've spoken to a realtor who lives next door to me. He can't be here tonight, but he's also concerned, as I am, about the placement of the shed. And at a glance, the shed in question, as Mr. Sheeline has stated, looks pretty good, better than a lot of people may have placed it otherwise, and what we've seen in some other neighborhoods, certainly. But it's new. It's made of wood, and the landscaping around it is going to shed its leaves, and the wood's going to get old, and eventually it's not going to look as good right there close to the street. Of immediate concern, too, is that allowing this exemption, what other neighbors in the area might want to do the same thing. In fact, I think when I called the zoning office, I was told that this violation was brought forward because somebody else has already called asking if they could put a shed in their, I don't know, I suppose front yard. So again, it sets bad precedents for such a nice neighborhood. It's a very large shed compared to the others in the neighborhood. We have one also. Most of the sheds in our neighborhood, including ours, is placed in the backyard. There are some on the side yards, as you pointed out, but a lot of them are in the backyards, not visible at all. There's a large, currently in front of this shed now, there's a large unpainted particle board ramp that's fully exposed that leads out onto the driveway, which again, kind of not fitting for the neighborhood. The shed is very near to the road. I think Mr. Besser said 12 feet. It's very, very near to the road. It's the main corner. It's the main thoroughfare in and out from the north side of that whole neighborhood. So anyone coming in from the north or going out from the north is going to see it. And while much of the painting and landscaping was done to camouflage the structure, the color and the landscaping to camouflage it, if it's approved today, this exemption, what's to stop the next owner or even the current owner from taking out the landscaping or from painting it white or yellow or pink or some other thing that's not so well camouflaged? And then, as mentioned earlier, it's a wood shed. It's going to deteriorate. It's painted. The paint's going to start coming off. The landscaping's going to die. The leaves are going to come off in the wintertime. So it's going to look different then than it looks right now when you visit it. So this is a big corner property, a large backyard. I'll call it a backyard, I don't call it a front yard, because it's got the owner also recently put in a very large privacy fence around the backyard. So like many in our neighborhood, why not put the shed in the backyard behind the privacy fence where it wouldn't disrupt the ambience of the neighborhood? So I am asking you not to approve this zoning amendment, to allow the neighborhood to continue to conform to zoning, to not put in a precedence. You're already being asked by others in our neighborhood to allow such a exemption. So I would ask you to vote against this variance and protect our neighborhood and the precedence that it will set by allowing front yard sheds.
I have a question now about the fence. She didn't get a variance for a fence, did she?
No.
Well, if this property has 3 front yard, you can't have a fence in a front yard.
No,
So
but-
either it's a front yard in this case, and then it has to be a front yard with a fence, and she can't have that up either.
As long as it doesn't go past this side of the house, she's fine.
Okay, have we seen it?
I've not seen it, no.
Okay.
That was not brought to my attention. We've dealt with the shed, is what we've dealt with.
Okay.
I have a
It's
question.
either a front yard or it's a backyard.
Before you put it there, or before it went up, did you come up to the BZA or the Planning Commission then and ask if you were in violation?
I didn't think about it.
Melissa?
You can come to the microphone.
To be honest, I didn't think about it. Somebody said I might need to get a permit. I came to like the building permit office and I showed them everything, and they said I didn't need it to put in a garage that I was just having delivered.
And was it a shed that was just delivered and put there, or was it built?
It was delivered. I mean, it's on a kind of a base thing that they built to put on, to put it on.
So
I mean,
it can be moved?
It can be, yeah. I mean, I can move it to the left side of the house where I think it'll stick out more, really.
Right, but I mean, you don't have to tear it down and start.
No,
from
I wouldn't have to
scratch.
tear it down.
Okay.
And if I can't move it to the left side of the house, like I said, the vehicle that's in there is just, I think, looks way worse than the shed does. So,
Thank you.
You
okay,
can't have a
thank you.
vehicle sitting on your property.
Is that a, Melissa, I'm sorry.
It's against ordinance. You can't have a vehicle sitting on your property.
In the driveway, right?
Do you get that vehicle out and drive it around occasionally?
I do.
Okay. So it is a functional,
Yeah, it's a 77. It's kind of rusted, and I don't mind leaving it outside. And like I said, I thought it looked better in the garage there. And to the gentleman's point about the ramp, I even offered to paint it. I mean, I agree the ramp doesn't look that great. I mean, it doesn't match the house or the garage, and so I could definitely have that painted. So, thank you.
And just so the board knows, for a structure of this size, it doesn't matter if it's prefabbed or delivered or not, it still needs a permit to be put on a residential lot. It does need a permit from our office.
Okay.
Okay?
Mr. Sheeline, just to follow up on one of Mr. Besser's questions. So if it is 12 feet or so, would that be in the right-of-way, or
No, it's not in the right of way.
it's not? Okay,
It is fairly close to the road, I agree, but it's not in the right of way.
okay. Thank you. I didn't know if that'd be another issue.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to add that, going offline, the front of the house is 80 feet from the street. The south side of the feet is 90 feet from Wabash and Grove, and the back of the home is 80 feet from Grove. So there's lots of real estate that's not in the Wabash front yard that could be utilized.
is there anyone else from the audience that would like to speak? Can you please state your name and address as well? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Heather McKillop, and I also live at 2331 South Wabash, about a block south of the said property that we're discussing. I first wanted to state to our neighbor that this is not anything of ill will or anything personal at all. What we're simply trying to do is, we live in an established neighborhood, and as Matt said, what we're trying to do is uphold zoning standards in the city of Kokomo that the leaders and past leaders have done so well, to bring the quality of life up in Kokomo, to encourage people not to move out into the county, not to move to Carmel, not to move to Fishers, but to live in nice, established Kokomo City proper neighborhoods. And that's exactly what we hope to do. If you're not familiar with our neighborhood, you should come see it. It's beautiful. It's very park-esque. It's down the street from Highland Park. Families walk up and down and ride bicycles all the time. The homeowners take pride in their homes. Their yards are edged, they're trimmed, there's flowers. It's a nice neighborhood with friendly neighbors that know each other. I too have spoken to a few neighbors, and I'm sorry to say, they don't really understand this process. They see a white sign in the yard and they don't even know that they're supposed to notice it. They too said they don't really like it. I can't speak for them. They don't really like it. They don't know what to do about it. They probably aren't forethinking enough about the future of our city or inclined to do so, to think about precedents and what this sets. Her property, it's debatable whether it is 3 front yards. I look in the front of the house, I see a front yard, a side yard, a large side yard to the south, and a very large backyard, which could easily have an access point within that new gate, that new fence where she could drive. Does it cost a little more to have a paved driveway? Do I want her to incur those costs? Not necessarily. But if you have a car that's your hobby fixing up, sometimes it incurs a little bit more of an expense. It looks very nice as far as a shed 12 feet from the road can look. But what we're looking at is someone else has already called and said, hey, she's got a shed, can I have a shed? So now what's to stop to say, well, he's got a shed and she's got a shed and she's got a shed, can I have a shed and can I have a car on bricks? What we're trying to do is just to prolong the family atmosphere, to create a nice neighborhood in the community. And we're just asking your help in supporting that family atmosphere, park-esque, and creating a nice neighborhood where people want to play and live. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg, we've heard a number of references to precedent and sort of ripple effect from this. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Well, number one, as Heather just pointed out, she really doesn't see 3 front yards, and I agree with that. Unfortunately, the way our ordinance is written, our ordinance says there's 3 front yards. That doesn't necessarily mean if you're standing there looking at it, you're going to see there's a front yard. But that's what the ordinance says. As far as precedents are concerned, yes, we look at that very strongly. When all we do is present the case, as you said, you are the information gathering board. That's why we have the public hearing. We present the case. We look at it. There are certain questions by state statute that have to be answered tonight, and those were read by the petitioner and by myself. As far as other people, now I never had anyone call me and ask me about putting a shed up in the neighborhood. I did have someone call me and say, is that shed legal that Ms. Dominguez put up? And we said no, according to ordinance, it's not. But as far as, we are very careful about setting a precedence. We try to be, but keep in mind, whenever someone files for a variance, they have to show a practical difficulty. They just can't say, I want my shed there because I want it there. They have to say, I want it there because of this. And sometimes, like Mr. Besser said, sometimes it's because there's two front yards, and it makes it difficult. But you have to show a practical difficulty. And if there's someplace else on the lot that the shed can go, that adheres to the ordinance, and that's where it should go. But we do look, what I'm trying to say, not very eloquently, is we do look at every variance that comes in, and if they can't show a practical difficulty, that's part of the issue. Okay?
Yep. So this precedent will only stretch so far, and only in similar situations.
In theory, yes, that's absolutely correct.
Okay.
I think that was a good explanation, Mr. Sheeline. Also, I'll throw out there that the 5 voting members here are just regular citizens. We're not in this as professionals. We've been appointed by different people or boards to represent the citizens. So we're sitting here as people who have come from other jobs and were retirement, but come in this evening to hear the case. But I know, speaking for myself, and I think hopefully all the board members, we've driven by each of the properties, each case, and the question in regards to that was asked at the beginning, was there any ex parte communication? That simply means, has anyone contacted us and said outside of this meeting, hey, let me tell you my thoughts on this case? So that's, it's important for all the citizens to know whether anyone has talked to us or we've talked to anyone outside of this meeting, and that's why it's always asked. And for example, this evening, Mr. Besser said, I've had some people give me some input, but just their thoughts. They haven't tried to influence me one way or another. So we hear both sides. We hear the petitioner's side. We hear Mr. Sheeline reads the staff findings, which would be the findings from the city. So we hear both sides, and then like we were told, our board is kind of finding facts and then saying, okay, what do we think this set of laws here, these guidelines are saying, and what's the best option? So this case, the next case, and all the cases that this board has heard over the years, we take all kinds of things into consideration, and we do the best with the information that we're able to gather. That being said, I do know, as we're talking about precedents, I do know that a similar case in this very same, I would say the same neighborhood, maybe not, but right at the corner of Cortland Boulevard and Webster, right where that three-way stop is, the house that would be right at that corner as part of this neighborhood. So if you were heading southbound on Webster and kind of veered a little bit to the left onto Cortland, the house on the left there came before this board some years back, quite a few years back, I believe, for a very similar variance, which was granted, but it was a much smaller shed, a shed that I would say probably stores lawnmowers and things like that. When I drove by, and what I try to do is, what I did do, didn't just try to do, was drove this way from different directions just to kind of see how did it look coming into the neighborhood, going out of the neighborhood, going to the left and to the right. And then I also went by the house I just mentioned at Boulevard, Webster, and Cortland. I hope I'm getting the streets right, but went by there too to just to remind myself, what does that look like? How does that compare to this case? Again, kind of a fact-finding mission. And it, again, to me, it felt like that's a smaller shed, one that's not like a garage. I mean, it's more of a storing equipment kind of thing. So just wanted to throw that on top of what Mr. Sheeline said, just kind of as an explanation for everyone.
Thank you. I'll open it up one more time. Is there anyone else from the audience that would like to speak to case 3, V19?
One more thing I'll say as you're coming up is, council just asked me a question. Did that case involve a fence? It didn't, but they had really tall bushes that really hit it all the way around. I mean, there are actually neighbors who I believe came up and spoke and said, I didn't even realize there was a shed there because it was so well hidden. So again, I was looking for similarities and finding differences more than anything, I think.
Matt McKillop, 2331 South Wabash. Again, just thinking again of the backyard that has been fenced in by the homeowner too, by a large fence. And it's been a long time since I've looked at that book and read the definitions of practical difficulty. But what's the difficulty in doing what most of the other neighbors have done with their sheds and putting it back behind the fence in the backyard? That would be.
Thank you. One final time, anyone else? Okay. We have no more questions, no more comments. Our 2 findings of facts have been read. We have a motion and a second related to case 3V19. So I will call the question. All those in favor of approving case 3V19, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
No.
Motion is denied. We will move on to case 5 SE19.
Just a second, please.
Sure.
Did everyone vote on that last case?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Unanimous.
Okay, next case is case 5 SE19, the petition of Paul Wyman for Faith Baptist Church requesting a special exception for the use of current building described at 1236 North Wabash Avenue.
Do we have a motion related to case 5 SE19?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve case 5 SE19 and adopt the findings of the petitioner as those of the board. That would make those findings part of the record.
Is there a second related to this?
You'll have an opportunity to speak. Not yet.
Is there a second related to this case?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Has there been any ex parte communication related to case 5 SE19? No. Okay. I believe we'll start with Mr. Wyman, if you would come forward and state your name, state your address, and give us a brief description of this case.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Paul Wyman, address 1533 West Lincoln Road. And as was mentioned, we're here asking for a special exception so that we would be permitted to put a sober living facility at this location at 1236 North Wabash. So about a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago, as you all are aware, our community came together and to fight the opioid epidemic. And one of the things that came out of that was a new organization called Turning Point here in our community. And Turning Point is the no barrier entry for folks who are suffering to come in and sit down and start getting connected to help and treatment. And one of the biggest gaps that we've identified in the last year at Turning Point was having a place for people who would go off and get treatment and become sober and want to pursue a sober life, is having a place for them to start that life over. A lot of times when people come back from treatment or they come out of jail and they've been sober for a while, they go back to their old stomping grounds, their old places where they were staying, they were living, family, friends. And that's generally where the trouble was to begin with. And so what ends up happening is they go back to that environment and all of a sudden they start using again and they relapse. What a sober living facility does is it provides a drug-free environment. This is an environment where there is no drugs. This is a place where they can come and they can live and then continue on this path of sobriety. They'll have an opportunity to get jobs. They'll have an opportunity for counseling and continued treatment while they're staying at a sober living facility. So contrary to what the stigma of addiction and drugs and those sorts of things that come along with a name like sober living, this is not a place where people will be doing drugs. This is a place where people will have a safe environment to continue on with their path to turn their lives around. And so with that being the biggest gap that we've identified, we have this incredible organization that has a place in Los Angeles, California, called Beacon of Hope. And they are interested and willing to open up a sober living facility for us here in Kokomo, Indiana, to help fill that gap and get these folks a place to live. And so the Beacon of Hope is very successful. They have a very prominent board of directors in California. And their connection to Kokomo, Indiana is one of their directors has businesses here, not only in Kokomo, but in the state of Indiana. And so in our conversations and knowing these individuals and sharing the work that we've been doing at Turning Point, they became very interested in having another location, and we were able to convince them that we had a big need for this here, and would they bring their successful operation to Kokomo. And so that's what we're asking for tonight, is for us as a community to continue to come around these individuals and give them every opportunity for success in their lives, and we think this is that opportunity.
Any initial questions? Do you know if Beacon of Hope has other locations in Indiana?
No, they do not.
This
No,
would be the
this would
first.
be the first one. Yeah,
Do you know how many locations they have?
they have one other location, and
One other
that's in
location.
Los Angeles, California. Yeah, yeah. And so, just real quick with the facility itself. Obviously, the facility will have to be renovated in order to accommodate the folks living there. And so tonight, what we're asking for, obviously, is the special exception for the zoning to allow it to happen. But of course, we'll go through the regular processes with state approvals and things like sprinkler systems and parking and all of those items that would normally come to get an occupancy permit. We will follow all of those. But in order for us to go down that route, we just need to know if we're going to be able to have a zoning to do that.
How many beds are you thinking of?
Yeah, so right now we're anticipating probably 20 to 30 beds.
Is there guidelines as far as statute of how square foot per living, or, I mean?
Yeah, and we'll follow all of those guidelines. My guess is the rooms will be designed like they are in the one they have out in Los Angeles, 2 per room, and we'll follow whatever necessary guidelines there are in the design of it. And we've already had the city fire marshal out to look at the building and give us an idea on the sprinklers and all of those sorts of things to make sure that we'd be able to become compliant with it.
What kind of supervision is there?
Yeah, so in a sober living environment, there's somebody that is there 24/7, and usually it's somebody that lives there, and they are the ones that maintain the sober living community. And then with that, there'll probably be 1 to 2 other employees, and then probably a handful of volunteers. And they'll be teamed up with other incredible organizations like Turning Point and other organizations in our community that are helping battle the drug epidemic. And then one of the real nice things about this location, if you will, is just a couple blocks down the road is the Fellowship of Hope, Inc. And they have a very large facility there, and they're one of the primary providers of all of the Alcohol Anonymous classes on a daily basis and the Narcotics Anonymous classes, just literally 2 blocks away. So when you look at this area, this type of assistance is already happening for people in need that are suffering from addiction.
Will they be mandatorily drug tested to be able to stay there?
Yeah, so part of sober living comes with the different testings. It comes with the treatment that they are able to continue to get there. So in the evenings, they'll actually have classes and counseling and those sorts of things. And then the partnerships is where the real strength comes in. So for example, if in Turning Point, if we refer somebody to the sober living facility, we're working with them on things such as getting job placement, getting all the basic stabilization, if you will, in their lives to continue to head down the road to sobriety.
And what's the age?
Yeah, so it'll be over 18 years old.
What's the typical residence for a client? How long are they typically at this location?
Yeah, so it really varies depending on how well people are doing and how much help they truly need. You can look at sober living facilities and see people have been in there 30, 60 days. They get their job. They really have taken to the new life, and they're on their way. There are other people that have lived in sober living for 6 months to 12 months just because they need that continued environment of help. The peer-to-peer aspect of this treatment is really incredible. You're talking about putting people in an environment where they're around other people who are trying to do the same thing, turn their lives around, as opposed to putting them in an environment where there's people trying to pull them back into the problems. And so sometimes people need a little bit longer, and in this facility and the way they work, it's an unlimited amount of time. It's about having the success at the end.
And the clients, will they be some current Kokomo residents? Will there be other?
Yeah, we really believe that the majority of people that live here will be from Howard County. The need is that great. The numbers that we see just at Turning Point alone are staggering. If you look at last year from May just to the end of the year, we had over 800 calls. We had over 600 different referrals and connections for services that we did for people, and over 300 individuals and families served. The need's great. And when I say that, I hope that people don't think that that's just a Kokomo issue or problem. You know, the truth of the matter is this is a national epidemic, and we have our share of it. And so what I always try to tell people is how are we as a community dealing with our share? And what are we doing to help the people in our community? And this is one of those incredible opportunities that we have before us to take that next step now. We know these people need this type of a clean environment, and that's what Sober Living does for us.
I think we'll proceed and have you read your findings of fact for us.
I'd throw a couple more questions out.
Yeah,
for
please
that.
do.
Is there a cost for will there be a cost for the clients?
There is. Right now, the current cost at the one in Los Angeles is $600 per month. And then there are some people that have had a challenge out of the gate paying that. And the way they work their organizations and through partnerships, people have been able to receive scholarships and subsidies to cover that cost. Because obviously they're providing 3 meals a day plus the counseling services and those sorts of things. So there obviously is a cost to run it. So that's what the number is now. It may be a little bit lower than that here in Kokomo, but that's one of the strengths that we come in with the partnerships and helping people find jobs and those sorts of things. And you'd be amazed at the number of employers that are out there right now that are willing to hire people that have gone through treatment or that have come out of jail and they're clean and want to start that new life. We've been pretty impressed with the number of employers that are willing to hire these individuals and help them get back on track.
Okay, thank you. And are these people who have struggled with drugs or alcohol or both?
Yes, yeah, all addiction like that, and you know, it's a very challenging thing for people to go through, as you know, and when they finally are in that position to be able to say, yes, I want help, and to see them go and battle through the treatment and get the help and the counseling. We often refer to it as putting a net under these people when they get out of those situations, when they come out of jail or when they come out of treatment, having that net under them to keep them on that right path. And Sober Living is one of those items that helps us put that net under them to keep them on the right path.
Okay. And then is this the Sober Living, is the housing once they return to Kokomo from rehab, or is it part of that?
Yeah, so from our standpoint, it would be immediate. It would be one of those immediate referrals. And so, for example, if we send somebody to a 90-day treatment, say through Turning Point, for example, and we have a relationship with that treatment center, then we're keeping tabs on the individuals when they're at treatment, how they're progressing, how they're doing, and then we know the time that they're going to be coming back from treatment to our community. And so we would have enough advance notice on that to be able to set up the partnership and the relationship to refer them right into Sober Living. So when they come back to town, they would go right into Sober Living. And it's some of the same with the programs that we're doing in the jail right now. You've had somebody in there for 6 months, a year, and they're sober now, and they've been through some treatment and different things in the jail. And when they come out of the jail, it'd be the same type of scenario. We're in there now 30 days prior to them getting out of jail. We know the date that they're getting out. And so now we work with the jail and that individual to say, okay, look, we've got a place for you the day you come out of jail. This is the Sober Living facility we can go right into, maintain the treatment that you're already doing. We'll have a case opened on them and right into Sober Living instead of going back to where they were, which is where we know the problems happen.
All right, and I'll throw out just one thing before you get to your findings of fact. As I'm looking out and seeing this is part of my neighborhood.
Sure.
So I will tell you, in the past, I mean, we have some people who are lifelongers there. I've been at the same intersection 46 of my 49 years.
Right.
Our largest neighborhood watch meeting was when a similar, I'll say similar, opportunity was coming years back. And I think people, so I know you probably already are anticipating the questions that people may have.
Sure.
And I know the neighborhood has changed a lot. I mean, you know, there's a lot of temptation, and it's not just in our neighborhood, even, you know, the nice neighborhoods where people are riding their bikes and families are out playing in the yards. I mean, what I see happen in my neighborhood as I'm mowing my lawn now, and I will say this in front of cameras and in front of everyone, there have been times I've literally been mowing my yard crying as I watch activity happen, because so that temptation sometime can be there, and I'm sure that's a question that people are going to have. I also am speaking from someone who has a relative who could benefit from something like this.
Sure.
I'm speaking as a neighbor who had neighbors concerned when we had an alternative school move into the neighborhood.
Sure.
But we were very blessed to have that school in our neighborhood. I think they added a lot to that neighborhood, and I think, I guess I'm saying, I think neighbors need to know how this is going to be a blessing if that's.
Yes. Well, you're bringing up a very valid point, and I certainly understand, as a result of stigma of the whole addiction, of the initial response from people is, whoa, not in my backyard, right? But a point you made earlier in your comment, this addiction and drug issue really knows no socioeconomic boundaries. The heroin addiction, it's rich people, it's middle class people, it's poor people. And you just pick the neighborhood in Kokomo, come out to my neighborhood, it's happened. We just can go right around and see how this has impacted our community. And one of the reasons I said earlier why I think this location really fits and why the folks perhaps picked this location is because of things like the alternative school that we moved in. And there were people concerned saying, oh my gosh, we have all these crazy kids running around, all these bad things happening. And that really didn't pan out that way. In fact, the kids probably more than anything became a blessing to the community. And then you have the Fellowship of Hope there on the corner. And if you haven't been over there, I encourage you to go visit with them. I walk into that Fellowship of Hope and I'm inspired when I see the number of people that come there every day looking to get help. And it's right here in this neighborhood. And so you're right, the temptation's great, but it doesn't matter where you're at in this community, the temptation is going to be there. It's how are we responding to the temptation. And I think the more like the Fellowship of Hope, the work that they're doing, the work that the Sober Living doing, the alternative school for the children, when they all come together and are working and locked arm in arm, it's our best chance of success to combat this issue. And truly, it's our best chance of success to help people. And at the end of the day, that's really what we're trying to do, is we're trying to help people, to help them become productive members in our community and allow them to have the dignity of life that every single one of us deserve. People don't wake up in the morning and say, gee, I want to be an addict today. Gee, I want to do heroin, or gee, I want to tear my family apart. That's not how this stuff happens, contrary to what you might read on social media. These drugs, these things are so powerful, and the reprogramming of people's brains and the way they cause us to function is unbelievable. It's like nothing we can imagine what's happening inside of people with this addiction. And so as opposed to just casting them aside, this is the time to lock arm in arms. This is the time to say, you know what, your life is every bit as important as mine. You're in a bad situation, you're in a different place than me today, but that doesn't mean your life's worth less. In fact, your life probably today is worth more, because the challenge is now upon me to reach out and help and lift you up. And so this is one of those opportunities when you look at all the exciting things that are happening in that area to help people, this ties right into that.
I have a question. If there's an infraction, in other words, they didn't pass the drug test, how's that going to be handled? And I have the same concerns that, I don't know, Chuck, because I tried to hear you, but I do have a hearing issue, and you're really talking quiet. However, with that being said, that's like putting kind of a Weight Watchers next to Jay Edwards. The temptation is very, very strong. And I noticed we just passed putting a drug rehab in on North Purdom Street, where the drugs are run rampant. That's my neighborhood. I know that for a fact. I know the neighborhood you're referring to. Read the paper. They're getting arrested there constantly over the drugs. Yes, drugs is everywhere. But why do we constantly keep putting these in the north end of town where the temptation is very strong? It does take down the value of the properties, of people's properties around it. I'm going to be honest. I wouldn't want it in my backyard. And I live in the north end, and I wouldn't want it in my backyard. My biggest concern is they're being watched. My biggest concern is no children's in there with them. I don't care if it is their children. I don't want you, maybe they wouldn't molest their child, but the drug person beside them, you have no idea if they would or not. I want a consistency of somebody watching them, because obviously, if they're on drugs, they're weak, and then things will happen to where it'll get out of control. And that's my biggest concern, because here again, another drug area is being dropped in my end of town.
Yeah. So you're actually making one of the arguments as to why we should really do this on this end of town. These are not people that are actively using. Okay, these are people that used to use, and these are people that are now sober. They've been through treatment, and they're trying to continue their life directly in a positive direction. And so when you say why in this area, well, sometimes when you have a problem, is you go right to the source and you provide that hope and you provide that help. And so when you look at the Fellowship of Hope, Inc. on the corner and the source of help and hope that they provide right there in this area, 2 blocks just straight down the road, that is sending a message. When you look at the alternative education and those kids, the message is, come here, we're going to love on you and we're going to help you. And the message with the sober living is, there is a better way. If you're you're right, it's all over the place. Just a block down the road, 2 blocks around, they'll probably be dealing tonight. Somebody will be using drugs tonight. And you know what our message is going to be to those people? There's hope for you. There's an opportunity for you. Come in a Turning Point, check in, let us open a case, let's get you help, let's get you in a sober living, let's get you out of the environment you're in. So you're really making the argument for us as to why we want to come into that area with these types of programs. Because it's just like if you look at the development work that's happened, when they go into blighted areas, what do? The minute things start to improve, all of a sudden crime and drugs go away. Why? Because criminals don't like that. They don't like things to look nice. They want to be in raggedy, rundown places. So these types of people who are dealing, they don't want to see sober living. They don't want to see AA and NA meetings because those are their clients. And they get frustrated by that. So then they go and look somewhere else and go find something else. And so we've just got to keep moving in. We got to keep attacking this stuff head on and lock arm in arms doing it. And what I'm telling you is I've never seen, like I've seen in the last year, the last 14 months in this community, the way organizations have locked arm in arms to come in and fight this battle and this epidemic. And can I say that we're winning? Let me tell you this, we're holding our ground right now if we're not winning. It has been a significant battle in the last 12 to 14 months.
So if they flunk a drug test, are they going to get a stay?
So there are absolute requirements in order to be able to stay there. And if we have somebody that goes into a relapse situation, then we're going to have programs ready for him to assist them again. Understand that people who are suffering from addiction, relapse is one of those things that happens. We deal with it all the time at Turning Point. There's many organizations in our town that do. And what we can't do for somebody in that moment is just throw them to the side, because the minute you do that, it just creates 10 other problems. So we continue to love on them. We'll take them from this program, put them back into treatment, whatever it is that they need to help them continue down that road. So there'll absolutely be guidelines that come along with this. And to the question earlier, there'll be somebody that lives there all day, every day and night. There's a curfew on these folks. They have to be in, probably, I think they're going to put the curfew around 9 o'clock. And so they have to be back by 9 o'clock or back for their scheduled treatment while they're in there, if there's counseling or group session going on or whatever the case may be. So it's a very positive and uplifting environment. There'll be a faith-based component to it. And again, this is about helping people. This isn't about taking care of 30 people who are actively using and drugs running rampant through this building. That's not sober living. Sober living is people who are really trying to take their life in a positive direction.
Any other questions before?
Yeah, I've got, from what I understand, this facility is going to be for individuals, not
Yes,
families.
that's correct. It's for individuals.
Just
That's
for
correct.
individuals,
Just for
not
individuals, yes. That's correct. Yeah.
Can you speak to the gender of the clients?
Yeah, so my guess is right now, the way it'll be designed will probably be male first, and then what they'll do is they'll look at their components and see, is there an opportunity to have it structured where they can do male, female, and keep a separation? But right now, I think the intent would be male. Yeah.
I think we'll go ahead and have you read your
Excellent,
findings of
thank
fact,
you.
if you would.
Okay, the proposal will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. This project will actually benefit the public health and safety of our community. It will complement the other organizations in the immediate area that are providing assistance and treatment to those suffering from substance abuse. The requirements and development standards for the requested use as prescribed in the zoning ordinance will be met. All requirements will be met, including an inspection from the city inspector, who will provide an occupancy permit before anybody lives in the facility. The grant and the exception will not subvert the general purposes served in the zoning ordinance and will not permanently injure other property uses in the same district or vicinity. We are seeking a special exception because this project does not fit with the current zoning classification. We're not seeking to change the zoning of the property. This project will not negatively affect future use of the property. And then the proposed use would be consistent with the character and district therein, the spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance of the Kokomo Comprehensive Plan. This project will complement the other organizations in the immediate area that are already providing treatment to individuals and families with substance abuse issues.
Are there any further questions related to the petitioner's findings of fact? Can I just ask about travel between this location and other locations that the clients will have?
Yeah, you bet. Transportation is a very important issue. In fact, the majority of the people living at the sober living facility won't even own vehicles. And if you look at most of them around the country, that's just the fact of where they're at in life. And so public transportation is a very big part of it. And we're very fortunate here in the city of Kokomo to have a very good public transportation system. A lot of our clients right now use the trolley and the public transportation. And there's also low-cost ways for us to transport them. You'd be amazed at the scholarship dollars that are available that we help these folks get transportation. And then some of the companies and organizations actually provide transportation to individuals that are in this scenario as well.
And you did say that some of these clients will be spending their day working, they'll be placed in.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the whole recovery process is stabilization, and part of stabilization is getting a job. And we're prepared at Turning Point to assist with that. But the Beacon of Hope in Los Angeles also has an internal program where they assist people with getting job placement as well. The sooner these folks can get a job placement and moving in a sober living facility and start making money, the higher the likelihood of success. And so that'll be a strong focus from all the partners for these individuals.
Paul, another question would be, or concern I would say would be parking. Would you address that?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. So we have actually, across the street actually, I'll tell you what, can I just hand these out to you guys real quick? Because it'll show you.
Will they have to go through development plan approval? They're going to modify the building, and they have to do any other approvals?
Thank you.
Thank you. So if you see the property that's highlighted in blue, just catty corner directly across the street, we have a contract on that building as well. And then that building, should we get rezoned here, that building would be demoed. It's a pretty dilapidated facility. And then that would be utilized as a parking lot. So we'd be able to support the parking.
Thank you. What's that? Yeah, and I know, after I asked that, I know that sounded kind of weird after your answer just prior to that most of them don't drive, but I know that some do, and
Yep.
and as you were saying, you're going to have staff members and
Sure. Yep.
and other people. And,
Yeah, and there's a few parking spaces already at the church location that staff would utilize, and then across the street would be for anybody that does have a vehicle.
Okay.
How long has this location been vacant?
I'm going to say every bit of 12 months for sure, possibly up to 2 years now. Time seems to be flying by, but I'd say for about a year or so at least. Yeah. And then they have had some small church groups that have met in there time to time, but truly occupied and operational, it's probably been about a year.
Are there other partnerships, organizations, access points for these clients that you would like to highlight at all? You've mentioned
Well, yeah, I mean,
Beacon of Hope and
Sure. I mean, when you look around at the number of organizations that are currently at the table that are working on these issues, so it's like, for example, Fort County Counseling, Community Howard, St. Vincent, Probation works very closely with us. We have people that sit around a table on a monthly basis now on a formal board of directors that are talking to each other regularly on this issue that just 14, 16 months ago were not talking on a regular basis. And so when we have a sober living opportunity like this, and you have organizations like Community Howard, St. Vincent, Probation, who are dealing with these individuals every single day, this is going to be an incredible opportunity for them as well.
any further questions?
Thank you.
We'll proceed with the staff's findings of fact.
Yes, staff findings for case 5 SE 19, the proposal will not be injurious to public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. Petitioners plan to remodel an existing church in order to repurpose it into a sober living facility, an asset for the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of one of our most vulnerable populations. Based on the information gathered, our office does not believe that this facility will be injurious to the surrounding community. Requirements and development standards for the requested use as prescribed by this zoning ordinance will be met. The buildings must meet the minimum requirements for front and side setback requirements on this zoning district. Most development standards are met by this existing structure. However, there is no parking. This issue will be mitigated by an appropriate amount of off-site parking that is planned for a lot catty corner to the property. This lot is currently under contract for purchase based on the decision made in this case as well as the upcoming rezoning case. Any permits needed from the health department regarding the occupancy and dining will be properly acquired based on the outcome of this case. The petitioner stated that he has already spoken to the fire marshal about building safety and installing a sprinkler system, also based upon the outcome of this case. The granting of the exception will not subvert the general purposes served by this zoning ordinance and will not permanently injure other property or uses in the same district and vicinity. The church on this site is presently vacant, and the staff believes that the addition of a sober living facility would be a positive use for the property that fits the development standards for this zone, Section 3.23 district intent of the City of Kokomo zoning ordinance states that we must recognize the need for quality, time, place, and manner of development standards to improve public accessibility and use of the property while minimizing impacts on surrounding properties. It has been stated that due to the nature of the facility, while residents are allowed to have guests, most do not receive visitors. The residents also do not typically own their own vehicles and rely on bikes, walking, and public transit. As the petitioner plans for around 20 residents, one live-in staff member, and only 2 ancillary staff members, traffic generated by this facility will likely be minimal. The residents will also have a curfew in place as well as other house rules in order to support the recovery-oriented nature of the facility. The proposed use will be consistent with the character of the district therein, the spirit and intent of this zoning ordinance, and the Kokomo Comprehensive Plan. A facility of this type would be an asset to our community, and the location in a residential and commercial area would be consistent with the character of the neighborhood. This new facility, while beneficial in assisting at-risk members of our community, may be concerning for neighboring property owners. While the information gathered by the staff has provided us with a positive outlook for the project, we encourage the petitioners to alleviate these concerns by answering any questions from the public to the satisfaction of the board.
Any questions related to the staff findings of fact?
Mr. Sheeling, what is the property presently zoned as?
IS institution.
It is?
Any further questions? No? Hearing none, we will open this up to our audience. If there is anyone in the audience that would like to speak to Case 5 SE 19, please come forward, state your name, address, and proceed.
Hello, my name's Jeff DeWiggins. I live at 1218 North Indiana. I want to tell you a little bit about my neighborhood, where you're wanting to put these people. I moved in there a little over 30 years ago. Quiet neighborhood, mostly retired people. You could leave your doors unlocked. You didn't have to worry. Currently, they've put in low-income apartments. I have a lot more foot traffic in my neighborhood. I constantly have to chase people out of my yard, out of my driveway. And now when I go out to mow or enjoy my yard, I feel like I have to carry. Now, having said all that, I just don't think our neighborhood needs to have drug addicts and alcoholics, whether they're recovering or not, brought to the neighborhood. We've got too much. Thank you for listening.
Hi, my name is Larry Brown. I live at 1231 North Wabash Avenue, and I'm the new guy on the block. I've only been there 15 years, and in that time frame, I've seen a major drug bust in front of my house. I've got drug activity going on in my back alley. This is on a weekly basis. I got a dog. It pretty much warns me of anything. I am very encouraged and enlightening by Mr. Wyman's comments as to what's going to go on here. I do feel like we need more information. I don't know if the structure of the building is going to remain current. Is it going to, blend in with our neighborhood? We have children. I see children constantly walking back and forth to school, to Pettit Park. I'm concerned about the children. I've seen the neighborhood dilapidate. I just don't want to see it go any further. That is all my concern is. But I am quite encouraged about the comments to Mr. Wyman about, the questioning and his response. I just feel like we do need some information here. Yeah, the neighborhood, love the neighborhood. I love my neighbors. We all know each other. We watch out for each other. But we can't be doing this constantly, I mean, I've had things removed from my property. I just don't know. I mean, I'm all for someone, I want to know if these people are going to be already went through a program, or are they stuck in there by order? Because I know the old Howard County Criminal Justice, jail is currently being used for something like this. I didn't know there was one of these up on the north end, something like this on the north end already. I'm welcome anything to improve our neighborhood. I mean, but I am encouraged by everyone's comments and input, but I'm just really concerned about the neighborhood. I mean, I'll leave some others to have a few words.
Mr. Brown, you said that you just wanted some more information. You mentioned wanting to know a little bit more about the structure and potential changes to the building. Mm-hmm. You had a question about how this might impact the children of the community, and then just a question about whether the clients were through a program or not. Is there any other information that you?
We're all trying to keep our home values up, and a lot of my neighbors are trying to do things to keep, at least keep it. And we see it all around us where there's others that's not. And I mean, the foot traffic is ridiculous. It's out of control. The gentleman over on Indiana, well, I live on Wabash in between McCann and stuff, and they've actually have found whatever they use to produce meth back in the alley, and it's just, I don't know. I'm just really concerned.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right.
I believe Mr. Wyman.
Sure.
Yeah, you too. Thank you for your kind comments. I appreciate that. The structure of the facility itself, the exterior is still going to look like the church. And so our clients are going to make a significant investment in the facility. If you go in the building, there's a tremendous amount of issues. There's some missing floor in some areas and different things like that. That's all going to be renovated, and it's going to be a very beautiful facility when it's all said and done. So from a structure standpoint, it will only help property values from a structure standpoint. To your concern about values in the neighborhood, the first two speakers have come up here and told you all of the horrible things that are happening in their neighborhood right now. The drug deals that they're actually witnessing, and things being taken from their homes and all those sorts of things. those by far are way more impacting on property values because you can pull any kind of police reports and see exactly what they're talking about. What we're talking about is bringing people here that are already on the road to recovery. These aren't the people that are causing the problems. These are people that have made a decision to move forward with their life in a positive direction. And so we think we're bringing positivity to an area that is suffering from some of the very things that they're describing to you. And so our facility isn't going to hurt property values. If anything, the facility itself, the building, will help because of the investment, and the type of work we're doing there brings the hope and the help to these people that I think it will send a clear message to the neighborhood that we're part of the plan for success, not the plan to go backwards.
Would you just reiterate again where this facility plays in with the client's experience through recovery? He had a question about
Sure.
Where the clients were at.
So these individuals that'll be staying here are individuals that have already made that decision to take that path of changing their life, their road to recovery. And so there's many different types of treatment that people go through. Some of it is an extended 90-day go away type thing and come back. We have a lot of local programs that are what they call IOP, intensive outpatient, where literally they are in this program 3-4 times a week here locally. They didn't go away somewhere. And so when they're in that type of a treatment and need a sober living area as part of their treatment, this would be a great benefit for them as well, which is why I mentioned the 2 hospitals partnering on a project like this. So it gives us the opportunity with people who are going down that road. I would never stand here and guarantee you that everybody that ever lives in a sober living facility would never relapse. But what I'm saying is because of the sober living and because of all the resources that will already be around this person, we certainly increase the chance of their success as opposed to going backwards. And if for some reason one of them did go backwards because of the wraparound services already around these people, we have a chance to get right back with them immediately and get them back on that track. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the audience that would like to ask a question, speak to this case? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Russell. I live at 1210 North Indiana Avenue. And I want to stand up and just say where my concern is concerning it for our neighborhood is when I saw the hearing sign at church, I called up to the city with the number that was on there. And nobody could tell me anything about and I had some personal conversations with individuals about that, and I talked with some of the neighbors, and one of our neighbors said that they would go ahead and be the investigator for it, the lead person to find out about it. Where and what we were told on our end was we'll just call Paul Wyman about it, and man, I just think the world of the work you're doing in this community, Paul. And but on this instance, what happened is we kind of feel like we got stonewalled a little bit on the information as far as protocol. If we're going to come to this meeting, okay, and I will say also with people on this board, I've talked to you personally and said, what do you know about this? And I was told you don't know anything about it. So I'm left, we're left with, well, what do we do here? So anyway, I personally didn't want to be on the forefront up here. I didn't really want to stand up publicly, say anything. I just wanted to find out what is going on here. Well, after about 2.5 weeks of calling Paul, the person calling Paul Wyman telling him it was one certain name, so we were investigating that via Google and internet, came up with nothing. And then he called back again and said he would get back with them, which he didn't. And last Friday, he got a hold of him again and said we'd get back with him. On Monday morning, which was yesterday, I got a text from the gentleman who was following up on this, and it was beaconofhope.la. So what I'm faced with a person that's lived 20 years in the neighborhood and continually trying to improve my property, and yeah, I see the issues that the 2 other gentlemen spoke about, but man, I want to be a lighthouse in my community and in my neighborhood. I was just concerned about protocol for this. for our neighborhood, okay? I mean, this is going to radically change, no matter what you say, it's going to change our neighborhood, okay? And I'm vested in this. I've lived in Kokomo for 20 years now. This is the longest I've ever lived anywhere in my life. This is home, okay? I have 2 boys buried in Albright Cemetery. You know, I'm telling you, I'm vested in Kokomo. I'm involved with this city on levels where, Paul, I'm called to homes where I'm holding the hands of moms and dads. I'm holding the hands of children whose parents have passed away because of these things. I've done funerals for these folks. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I know what our city needs. But I want to speak to the protocol here that as a homeowner, as a pastor in this community, that what I just endured over the last couple of weeks shouldn't go on, okay? And I'm laying that at your feet, okay? And I'm really disappointed in it. And I just felt like our neighborhood should know about this. And I thought more neighbors would be here tonight. I went up my neighborhood last night. Once I got the information, I went up my neighborhood last night. Not a single person in my neighborhood up the 1200 block of Indiana knew what was going on there. Today, I've covered not only Indiana, I went through Wabash Street, McCann Street, those blocks there, and just tried to talk to neighbors, say, do you know what's going on here? I'm telling you, 95% of the people I talked to had no idea what was going on there. Okay. The one thing I want you to know, I did it.
Can I
Well, I want
talk to
to.
you about the protocol?
Can I just pull back just a little bit? There's somewhere I want to go with it. I just want to say that's how I see it from my end.
Good.
On my end, I got the information yesterday. Looked up Beacon of Hope on the internet. Sounds really good. And so I ended up calling the numbers they had in there. And I had about a 46-minute conversation with a person in Los Angeles while I'm going to Google Maps, seeing the area they're at. Okay, I mean, I'm investigating this. I want to be a good neighbor to the people if they end up coming there, but I want to know, what is this Beacon of Hope? And I couldn't get any information about, okay, you say you're faith-based. What does that mean? You know, I didn't get a whole lot of information, except the gentleman I talked to is with the very popular International Churches of Christ there in Los Angeles, and that's where he takes some of the people to. And it sounds like a very good program. They have a formal hotel, okay? 84 beds they've got, or 84 men that they put there. They got 3 staff members. And what I'm trying to do is find out about it, okay? And I found out a whole lot about it, and I really appreciated the gentleman who talked to me about it. But they're in a different kind of a neighborhood than we are, okay? And, you know, they're close to downtown LA. It's a different structure altogether. But I guess my concern, especially with what I'm hearing within what's happening in our city, and I think I'm vested in the same thing Paul is there as well, if, you know, that facility is really going to be big enough, okay? Okay, I mean, seriously, you're going to put it there, but I think there's going to be a whole lot more of a need that's going to grow from there, and yet it does affect our neighborhood. So I guess what I'm trying to say, I don't know what you plan on doing tonight if you vote on it, but to be fair to the neighborhood, I think, okay, because what I really appreciate about you said when it came to the garage that you went out and talked to some of the neighbors. I didn't hear any of that tonight yet, okay? That nobody talked to anybody in the neighborhood about what was going on here. Maybe that happened, maybe it didn't. I'm just saying that now. But I'm just talking about maybe we need a little bit more time as a neighborhood. That's what my appeal is, so that Paul can make his case, our concerns can be addressed, because I don't feel like the neighbors I talked to, their concerns were addressed. So that's what I want to say to you tonight. There you go, Greg.
Well, I'm sure Greg can speak to this, but I do want to say that this forum is for the express purpose of finding out that information and having that dialogue with your neighborhood and with the people who want to make an investment in your neighborhood. This is part of that. This is part of that open dialogue, part of that process. The fact that you've been able to come here tonight and get some answers about this project, ask some questions, and hopefully get some further information, I think speaks to the viability of that process and how functional it truly is. And so
Okay.
I'll start with that, and then I'll let Greg speak to that process, and by all means, you'll have an opportunity to respond.
Go ahead.
Well, the process and the protocol in this case has been no different than any case that we always do. Our process is set by state statute. The cases have to be advertised in the newspaper, which this one was. Adjoining property owners have to be notified, which they were. A sign has to be placed on the property 10 days before the public hearing, which it was. And I'm not sure what phone number you're talking about, Jeff, but I can tell you, in the last month, I know personally, I've probably had 15 to 20 conversations with folks from the neighborhood who have called me personally. And my office got several phone calls today.
Well, yes, because of what my going through the neighborhood. I'm sorry.
Would you, yeah.
Yeah, that was from me going through the neighborhood. I think many of them called today.
But I've had calls long before today. too.
Yeah, and it was my call, and I talked to you on the phone as
You
well.
and I even
Yeah.
had a conversation. So the protocol and the process is the same for every case.
Yeah. So what I'm laying
Well,
at.
I'm sorry. I want to make one comment too when you said about, sorry.
Mike.
Charlie.
When you talked about him talking in his neighborhood about the shed. First of all, that's why we're asked, do we have any conversation with you guys? Because our opinion isn't supposed to be formed by us going out into the neighborhoods and talking to you. We have guidelines we have to follow.
Okay.
And it's tough. It's tougher, I think, for me, and maybe not, but it's tough because if it's not against the zoning ordinance, that is how we are to vote. But when you have the community come up here and they talk to you about it, then sometimes that goes out of your mind because it gets emotional.
Right.
Okay? So that's why we don't go into the neighborhoods when a sign gets pounded in your yard and say, hey, what's your opinion? Because otherwise your opinion is going to reflect what we are supposed to be doing up here.
So what you heard is my ignorance of the protocol, maybe a little bit, but yeah, but you heard the emotion with it as well. But it's
Yes,
not. It wasn't
yes.
so much you guys. You guys referred us to Paul Wyman. We had a spokesperson that tried to get a hold of Paul Wyman and extrapolate the information, and that's probably where it fell. And Sean wasn't here tonight, but that's what he wrote me, and about his conversations with you. Yeah.
Were there any specific questions or that you wanted addressed or answered this evening that?
I just wondered if it was fair to our neighborhood about who was coming in. It was an organization from California. It's not a local, but I think Paul may have cleared that up a little bit. At least there's a partnership. And I understand he's, the real estate agent that's selling the building there too, so, and so my concern was what is actually coming into our neighborhood. I still don't have a good grip on that. As somebody who was trying to come to this meeting understanding what was coming, okay? And so I guess what I'm asking, my question would be, could you give our neighborhood a little bit more time? That's what I'm asking.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you, Pastor. I am surprised that you didn't call me Pastor. We've broken bread together. You've come to me in the past when you've needed things, and we've shared quite a bit. So I am a little surprised that you just didn't pick up the phone and give me a call. But to that point, the gentleman he's referring to did call me, and we had a very lengthy conversation. And at first, when he called me, he was very concerned about the project. And as I explained the project to him at the end of the conversation, he said to me, he goes, oh, well, that makes a lot more sense, and I understand what you guys are trying to do there. That's very different than my image of people shooting up on the corner and doing heroin and falling on the ground and that sort of thing, because he had the stigma like everybody else did about this project. What he asked me that day on the phone was who is purchasing the property. He would like to know that. And the purchaser of the property, the organization is called Hands for Hope, or Hope for the Hurting, I'm sorry, it's a different organization, Hope for the Hurting, and Nick Salvato. And I shared that with him that day. I said, this is who's buying the property, this is the guy's name, and then we had this long conversation. At the end of the conversation, he told me that was fine. It wasn't until late last week that he called me back and said, I can't find any information on these guys. I think the name that you gave me is wrong. And I said, the name I gave you is not wrong. I know who's buying the property. He says, well, I can't find any information. That's when I said, well, I'll go back to my office. I'm not at my office today, but when I get back to my office, I'll look and see if maybe I told you wrong. So when we were looking at it, that's when he said, well, is there a different name? And I go, well, the name of the sober living they do out there is Beacon of Hope. That's not what the name necessarily is going to be here, but I gave him the accurate of who was purchasing the property. I think that's where the miscommunication lied in this deal. So that's the scenario, is how that happened. I wasn't trying to stonewall anybody. It was very upfront. We had a very lengthy, and when I say lengthy conversation, it was a long conversation, the first one.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a statement here. I appreciate you giving me credit for going out and talking to the neighbors, but being on this board, you're not allowed to do that. Okay? So when my neighbors call me or when they come over, as I did the two neighbors that came to me, I said, before you go any farther, I can't have any discussion with you. I can tell you what I know about the case. I can tell you when the hearing is. And if you want to go to the meeting and find more information, you can. That's all I'm legally allowed to go. I can't go out and say, what do you think? Where do you live? All that. So, and it happens a lot, to me anyway, on this board. People
That's
will
me
call
too.
and they'll come by, and you have to tell them right up front, we have to stop right here. What I know is what I get in an email and what I read, and every member on this board, I had no idea. I've had the honor and privilege of being on this board for 12 years. I had no idea the dedication and the homework you have to do on every case every month. It is unbelievable what these people have to go through. And we do it because we love the community, but it's not cut and dried. So we get put in a hard place a lot of times. Right. But when somebody does call, if somebody calls in the future, that's on this board, that's going to be my answer. I can tell you what the case is about, who's represented, and when the meeting is, and then I'm done. So, and that's what I did with my neighbors. So I didn't go out and solicit people, but I did speak to them, but I wanted to make sure that was clear. That's all I had, Mr. Director.
Hey, I want to add one thing now that I remembered Mike's name. I'm sorry, Mike. I'm the emotional nutcase on the group, and I try to control it, and it's tough. I wish the other lady was here on the case that will have to move the shed, because I, like her, when I first became on these commissions, I thought my property, I can put whatever I want on it. I had no idea that you had to go up in front of the BZA or the Planning Commission and make sure it was allowed. And thank God I got on this commission, because my backyard might look like, I got 2 grandbabies now, it might look like Kings Island, but just a smaller form. So this has really taught us a lot up here, and it is tough. Like Mike said and I said, people call me at home and say, hey, I want to talk to you about it. And I go, can't call me. I always throw them on Greg. You have to call Greg. Don't call me. And it is tough, because it is emotional. It is your neighborhood. You take pride in your home, or you wouldn't live there. And so it's a tough call, but we have to look at, is it a violation of an ordinance? And so it is really, this is probably one of the hardest, and I work at Chrysler, I build transmissions. This by far is the hardest job I've ever had, believe me.
Response. I just want to say, so like I said, I was probably speaking from ignorance of mine, what you were faced with, especially there's 2 guys on this committee that I know personally and really care a lot about and respect. And when I didn't get the response, they were telling me what they could legally tell me, and I understand that a whole lot better now. And I still thoroughly respect you, Paul, okay, and what you're doing in our community in that regard. Just, we'll talk after this meeting. Okay, thank you.
I do think it's an important message, especially for those maybe who are watching this later, to realize that it's so easy to pick up the phone and call 456-2330 and say, here's what I want to do on my property. Is there anything that I need to be aware of? Am I allowed to do that? And I mean, I get people calling me all the time saying, hey, you're president of the U.S., right? No, I'm on the Board of Zoning Appeals. So they ask me, can I do this? And I say, you know what? I mean, I could sit here and go through this book, but the best thing to do is to call the Plan Commission, and they'll tell you what you can do and what you can't do. And Greg can't speak for this board. As I mentioned earlier, there are 5 voting members who are just citizens, but Greg, I know, and I've told people before, Greg can tell you, I can tell you here's how the board has voted in the past, he has no idea how the board's going to vote. We don't know how we're going to vote. We don't even know the points of the case until we get to this meeting. So, Greg can say, and I know he has said before, like, for example, with a business and a sign, they'll say, well, I want to put my sign here, and Greg will say, well, I can tell you, the board isn't very sign friendly. The board wants to stick with the ordinance with signs. So you're more than welcome to come up here, or you're more than welcome to bring your sign more in compliance with what the ordinance says. So, we do have to take each case by case and look at the pros and cons. I will say again, as part of Paul, as I mentioned early on, I mean, this is part of my neighborhood, and I know early on with the crossing, we had people in the neighborhood who were concerned, and I had some neighbors say to me, every morning I go out and there's breakfast wrappers in my yard. This school, this is not going to work. And my question to them was, well, did you go down and talk to the school? Well, no. Well, I'll do it if you're afraid of the school. So I went down there and spent some time talking to the administration and the students. And I said, guys, you are part of our neighborhood. You moved into our existing neighborhood. I've been here many years. These neighbors have been here many years. You are welcome in our neighborhood if you can live in our neighborhood. Our neighborhood isn't going to change because of you. And here's what I'm recommending. You can carry your breakfast in its wrappers and in its bags to the neighborhood, but you can carry that trash to a trash can. There are trash cans in your school. There are trash cans along the way down the alley to your school. No neighbor cares if you throw your McDonald's wrapper in their trash can. They would much rather you do that than throw it in their yard. So my point in saying that is, my point to some of the neighbors when they had those concerns with the crossing, guess what happened? The kids quit throwing their wrappers in the yards. One day I was out mowing shortly after the school came in, and I looked down, I thought there was maybe a little fight going on. There were a bunch of kids gathered down at the end of the alley a block down. I thought, oh great, here's crazy Chuck. Put my mower away, walked down there. What's going on? I said, nothing. We're just chilling. You're chilling in someone's yard who doesn't want you in their yard? Well, why not? Well, because this is their yard. This is their safe space. This is their property. My recommendation is, we'd love to have you guys here, but here's where I would recommend. You could hang out here or there. You can even come over and hang out in my yard if you want. You're more than welcome to come mow, but it's that conversation. It's so important, and so often anymore it seems like we don't have that, and we feel like our hands are tied. And I can tell you one more example: fireworks. I think people, all you have to do is look on Facebook and see people saying, but these people in my neighborhood keep shooting off fireworks. Well, a couple years back, a neighbor texted and said, I'm going to call the police if the people across the street don't stop shooting off these fireworks. I have kids who are trying to sleep. I said, hold on a minute. And I went out my front door. I'm on a corner. There was a neighbor on one corner who texted me, and the neighbors on the other two corners were out there doing fireworks. Guess what happened as I walked out my front door? They stopped and they just stared at me like, oh, is he coming over here? Yes, I am. And I went over and I said, hey, quick question for you guys. Are you almost finished? And the reason I'm asking is because there are neighbors who have children who are trying to sleep. And if you're almost finished, I'll text the neighbor back and say, hey, they're just wrapping up. But I will also say, if you aren't almost finished, this neighbor is going to call the police. The other thing I'm going to tell you is the police have more important things to do than to come to our neighborhood because you're lighting off fireworks at an unreasonable time. And their response was, oh yeah, well, that was the last one. You just came out at the time. Or it was that communication. I said, all right, that's great. You guys have a good night. And my neighbor texted and said, did you just go out and talk to them? I said, yes, tell your kids to have a good night. It's communication. And if this is approved, just so you know, this, Mr. Sheeline, correct me if I'm wrong, and or Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first step, and there are other steps that you're gonna have to go through before anything even happens there. So I'm looking at a possibility of this facility coming into our neighborhood, or an unknown group coming and buying this property, or this church sitting vacant with rocks going through the windows and who knows what else. I'm looking catty-corner at a building that I think is vacant, but I know I've been in that before when they had little rummage sales in there years ago, and I was a little bit nervous in that building. Like, is this building safe? So I guess my point is, if this gets approved, and if we have concerns, we take those concerns to the door. We take them there. We take them to Paul Wyman. Paul has mentioned local organizations like Turning Point and For Community and different, there are all kinds of places that are working together. I can tell you that the meetings Paul is talking about, the monthly meetings, I have gone to some of those meetings. I have seen the people who are engaged in those meetings. I've even made comments during those meetings, surprisingly enough. I don't think that those organizations are going to let something come into the neighborhood that is not good, that's not beneficial, into my neighborhood. I know that's not my street. It is my block, three streets away, but that's my neighborhood. And I will tell you, there aren't many people, you guys who are here, Jeff and Jeff especially, I know you guys are as passionate about our neighborhood as I am. I have shed many tears over our neighborhood, some happy and some sad. But sometimes when I'm walking through the neighborhood, there was one night I took a rosary walked through the neighborhood and prayed my rosary, and when I finished that, I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to walk up and down these streets, and every house I pass where somebody who has lived there that I remember, somebody who has died over the years, I'm going to say a prayer for that person. Can I tell you that there were over 100 prayers prayed that night, because there were over 100 people over my lifetime, and that's been at least 6 or 8 years ago. People who were part of that neighborhood who have died. Why? I mean, why did I do that? Because those people are part of who I am. Those people are part of my life. They're part of that neighborhood. The crossing matters. The crossing is, I think, moving to a new facility. Here's my concern now. Who is going to move in there? I'm glad that the crossing was in there, because there wasn't a vacant building. There were people there. There was life there, and lives were being affected there. Not only that, but I know the groups, the other people, the organizations in Kokomo that were supporting the students there, and that gave it credibility. That being said, I'll try to wrap this up. I see some people from Turning Point. Would one of you step up and tell me how, if this is approved, how does this impact the work that Turning Point is doing in Kokomo?
My name's Sherry Rail. I am a navigator for Turning Point, and this is a very pivotal piece that needs to be added to our community. There are many barriers that we've seen in the community as addicted individuals come in to seek help. We right now have over 190 calls coming in a month to our facility asking for the ability to get out of addiction and get off the hamster wheel and get recovered. With that being said, there's a lot of places that we can send them, but eventually they do want to come back here because they have family and they have people who are counting on them back here. So the sober living environment is very important for us to have. And I appreciate that a company is looking at us for that endeavor. And when you have vacant property, that's when drug houses happen on neighborhoods and streets. And so this is going to not only take this viable property and make it something that can establish and be something pivotal to our community and really transition us in the crisis that we have been for this addiction issue. The thing that is really heavy on my heart is the fact that I advocate for these people every day. I have never been the addicted except for food, and that is an addiction, right? And we all suffer with, needing a hot fudge sundae or strawberry dessert of some kind. And addiction is really no different. We all are really a decision away. You have a shoulder injury, you get hydrocodone, into you, and then all of a sudden you could be on a kick yourself, whether it's a dental issue, a medical issue, and then one thing leads to another. So when I deal with these people, a year ago, I would have never dreamed that I was dealing with addicted individuals or mental health issues. And I have learned to come to love these individuals because they're really no different than you and I. And I have seen family members, from my past deal with addiction and come out of it, and seen how they've lived their sobriety out. And so when people do want to get off of the substance and get their life back, they need that opportunity in our community to be able to do that. And so this is going to be pivotal for them. But I am telling you that I drive people to detox. I drive people to the rehab facilities. I put them in my car as that woman. And most of the time, sometimes it's a man, sometimes it's a woman. And I never feel fear or concern for my life in a lot of respects. So I just wanted to share that with you because these people really are seeking to be productive citizens in our environment, and we have to create that safety net, if you will, for them to be able to have and thrive. Because they have children and they have parents and they have, people that are counting on them to come back and be productive. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess to wrap up my point a little bit from earlier is with the crossing as my example, I went over and I built a relationship by saying, hey, here's what we expect in the neighborhood. We're glad you're here. So I think if this or any other facility or anything comes new to my neighborhood, to your neighborhood, the best thing to do rather than to stand back and say, point fingers, is to maybe go and introduce ourselves and say at the beginning, just want you to know this neighborhood matters to us and we have high expectations. It may not look like it sometimes from activity you see, but guess what? That activity you see is not our neighbors. It's not our neighborhood. We're not the guys going in locking our doors because we don't want to see it. We're the guys going out mowing saying, okay, my tears are there, but guess what? My tears are there while I'm calling the police. My tears are there while I'm taking pictures of license plates. Maybe I shouldn't be saying all this, but I'm not going to just say, this is my neighborhood. So wherever you live is your neighborhood too. If something comes, ask those questions, but also say, hey, this is what we're looking for. This is what we expect. This kind of organization, when I'm seeing the groups, and Paul mentioned the partnerships, Turning Point and Fellowship of Hope and Fore County and Howard Community Hospital and the probation department and things like that, I believe that and I know that and I've seen how they work together. And trust me, guys, if there's a concern that comes up, if this passes and passes the next thing and the next thing and ultimately this takes place, I can tell you there are multiple phone numbers that we can call and say, we have a concern with this place. And I believe, and with all my heart, that it'll be taken care of that day. Without a doubt, I believe that.
Is there anyone, please come forward.
Speaking, again, my name's Jeff DeWiggins, 1218 North Indiana. In our neighborhood, if you're out causing trouble, you're going to meet Chuck. If you're on my block, you're going to meet me. If you meet me, then I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to get it dealt with. If I have to go to Mr. Wyman, if I have to come here, I'm going to get it dealt with. Because it's my neighborhood, and I care a lot about it. I care about the people that live in my neighborhood. I'm not against what they're doing. But they're going to have to show me they have a very secure measure. to make sure that my neighborhood isn't affected by this. Thank you.
Just a reminder, please state your name and address for the record.
John Runyon, 1221 North Wabash. Been there for over 55 years. I've seen the blight in the neighborhood go on. I would rather see that church turned into an apartment. That way the people that are there will be there for a while, not over 100 a year coming and going. You know, he says he's going to put a parking lot catty corner. In the 55 years, I know of 3 people that's gotten killed crossing North Street. Since they put in the new sidewalks, which are very nice, I do like them, we lost over a foot of roadway. When everybody is parked at home at North and Wabash, only one car can move at a time. Nobody can turn off of North Street until the person off of Wabash is gone. Every Sunday it was like that with the church. It was nothing but a disaster. And then you have people that want to stop on North Street, which is no parking on that side, to try and drop people off. And then they got to stand there and talk, and traffic gets built up, and then you start getting road rage going on. You know, and he mentioned the Fellowship Center down the road. Okay, they do a great job too, but they don't live there. That was already in a big enough building with an established parking lot. We still have the foot traffic from them and the problems. Now, if we got 100 more a year coming through our neighborhoods, they got to have something to go do during the day. The yard that this property is on is not big enough for 20 people to go out and have a lawn chair. So they're going to be roaming around somewhere, let alone their friends that's going to be coming in who aren't ready to get straight yet and trying to influence them back the other way. We need what you're talking about. I understand that completely, just not in my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the audience? Yes. Would you please state your name and address?
My name is Amanda Lawson, and I reside at 1224 North Wabash, just 2 lots away from the church. I have a 12-year-old son. We have lots of children in our neighborhood. I've been there for 11 years now and seen it go from not having as many children to having a lot of children. On my road alone, I have my son and 3 of his cousins right across the road. They're always playing outside. Kids are walking down from Pettit Park. My son has to walk down to the bus at that area there where he wants to put a parking lot. There's already enough, traffic there. I'm opposing it because there's children in the area, and I don't agree to it. I think it's a good thing. I'm a nurse, so I totally agree with having resources available for people that need that, but like John said, not in our neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Corey Malone. I've been in the neighborhood for 37 years. I live at 1224 North Wabash. I agree with Amanda. My son lives in the same, he lives with me. There's a lot of kids in our neighborhood. My son crosses North Street in Wabash. That is a high traffic area right there. The property that Mr. Wyman is talking about tearing down to put a parking lot for their parking area, that is a bad area right there. I've seen so many wrecks right there and stuff right at that particular corner. There's a lot of kids walking there from the other side of the street to go to Pettit Park School My son crosses there as well. I've seen so many kids there, as well as Mr. Runyon. It's just a bad area. I mean, there's not enough property at that church there in particular for them to have guests and stuff there. I do not understand how it's come that they picked that particular area to have a facility there. If they have to renovate the place to put sprinkler systems and stuff like that in there, where that they could pick another facility that's already been established. They have that establishment down there on the corner of Webster and North Street, that clinic, that Hope Place there. There's the old former Marsh building that already has sprinkler systems already there, ample enough parking area there. I don't understand why that they couldn't pick a established place like that already. And if they plan on expanding maybe later on, why don't they pick a place that's already almost established? You know, and I don't understand how's come that they wouldn't get a place, you know, that's already, I mean, pretty much better suited for them. You know, it doesn't make sense where that they got to renovate a small established place like a church, you know, especially in our neighborhood. You know, that all of us are concerned, you know, with our children, the ample enough space for them to be outside the building, you know, renovation wise, you know, where that, you know, they have to tear down or remodeling, stuff like that, you know. It's just a lot of concerns, you know, that all of us are concerned about, you know, where that, and also too, why would they pick on the north end? I mean, seriously, when they have all these other places, you know, I understand like Four Corners and stuff like that, that you said that in other community areas, you know, why won't they pick somewhere else closer to, you know, maybe like downtown, you know, the other places that are available already there? That's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the audience that would like to speak? We've had some concerns raised about space, yard space. Would you like to address that? Just the daily schedule for clients, perhaps at this location?
Sure. So the majority of folks here during the day, they will be gone at work. And then in the evening time is when they'll be offering a lot of the different types of support classes and or education. And then the curfew's at 9 o'clock. So there's just not a tremendous amount of outdoor activity for these individuals. And with it being not too far from downtown, there are things like parks and other things for them to do. And as you said, most of them have bicycles and those sorts of things. So the commute to those areas is just not going to be an issue for them.
Paul, can you address two other questions that were brought up? One is how taking the building catty corner down might alleviate some vision issues maybe, or how that might affect the safety, like with traffic accidents. And then also several people have mentioned the safety of their children. Could you address those two?
Yeah, so a couple things. You know, when you have vacant buildings, in being in real estate business, I can tell you vacant buildings deteriorate faster than buildings that are occupied. And there's a whole host of reasons why that happens, but it's just a proven fact. And so when you have a facility, a building like that over there that's not maybe being taken care of as much as it should, it's going to deteriorate faster. And when you have deteriorating buildings and or blight, as several people have mentioned, you know what that attracts into a neighborhood. So in this situation, some of that will be cleaned up. The area will be opened up a little bit. It'll be cars there. For individuals that will be parking, and I agree with you, it'll probably open up the area a little bit, maybe for a little more visibility. I'm not aware of the amount of traffic accidents that they're referring to in that area, so I can't speak to that directly, but I can just tell you that you know, having a handful of cars parking over there on a daily basis is not going to add to anything significant that may or may not be happening in that location. As far as children go, You heard from the neighbors what's going on in the neighborhoods. You've heard Chuck's passionate talks about what's going on in neighborhoods and how he handles it. And so, based on what I'm hearing from individuals, these kids seem to be exposed to these types of things on a daily basis. And I'm confident that the individuals that are coming here, the ones suffering from addictions, I hope that we're not automatically putting some sort of a stigma that these individuals are out to harm children. That's certainly not that's not their background. That's not why they're in this situation. And so I just really believe that in a sober living environment, people who are trying to make their life right, their thoughts aren't, I'm going to go outside and hurt children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Larry Brown, 1231 North Wabash.
Would you step a little closer to the mic, please?
Pardon me?
Would you step a little closer
yeah,
to the mic?
Larry Brown, 1231 North Wabash. I think a lot of, I can attest to some of the wrecks and the traffic. If you take a look at North Street heading north on Wabash, when everybody is at home, you cannot see the stop sign, okay? When there's people parked in front of that, you know, which they are technically, the spot is just a few short feet, I want to say 40 maybe, in front of, on North Street, and there's no parking, on Wabash, there's no parking on North. I've seen people drive through the stop sign and bam, okay? I've seen people cross over and same issue. I think a lot of people's concerns here is, you know, a lot of it's been addressed as far as my concerns with who will be here, staying at this place. It's the concern of the congestion. I also have, Marsh is closed down. We do have a little convenience store a few blocks down. I'm sure they're gonna work out how they're gonna provide for these people as far as meals and stuff. But yeah, as far as the property, I used to go to that, if I can remember the name of it, when I was a little kid, right there on corner of North and Wabash. It used to be a little convenience store back in the day. Yes, it is, yeah. And it is a very dilapidated building. I would be glad to see it gone. We do have Northwest Park, not several blocks away. And, you know, there is city transportation bus stop right there. There is a lot of congregating going on there. I'm not sure if, it's not my property, but the smoking and the cigarette butts and the trash and the debris all ends up on all of our properties, you know. So, you know, and like the gentleman said, it's something that needs to be brought to them if something like this happens. And
Now, Mr. Brown, if I can interrupt on that point, that's kind of my point. If there's an organization there, we go down and we knock on the door and we say, hey,
I understand.
You know, you guys are leaving cigarette butts out there, but who do we go to now if someone's out there leaving the cigarette butts that are blowing in our yards? Now,
yeah,
you know, those people are just out there. If they're out there doing that, then who do we go to? Where, you know, with this, we would have something, so.
I would really like to, you know, just like get more input as to what they plan on doing for where the employees are going to park, where, you know, the theft, it doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in, you know, upscale, wherever, but the theft in the neighborhood, you know. So I would like, you know, just like an overall view of eventually when we're through this process of what it's, you know, we're going to be dealing with.
Yeah. I think we're getting to the point where we're repeating things because the parking issue has
Yes.
been addressed.
Yes, I understand about the parking,
theft
where it's
issue-
going to go.
Yeah, the theft issue.
Yeah, is it going to be elevated up?
Well, again, I think if so, we call the police. So I would say at this point, I do have a question for council. I made the motion. Do I need to stipulate that if this is approved, it's
Yes,
just for?
yes, for this
Yes.
property owner, yes, yes.
Okay,
We've
because
already talked about that, so. yes.
Okay, I would like to call for the vote. I think that we've got things all my questions are answered, I think.
And just for the record, Chuck is saying that this would be just for this property owner at this specific location. If this property did exchange hands at some point in the future, this special exception would not carry forward to a new owner of that property. It would have to come before the board once again. So, one more comment? Please come forward if you would.
I'd just like to ask Mr. Wyman, is this the only property that this owner's looking for as this, to have this, to have rezoned for this particular facility, or are they looking at other places in Kokomo?
At this time, this is the only property.
So they have no other places to look at, just this one particular, no other options?
There may be other options in the future. At this time, this is the property they're interested in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pardon me, but real quick, I don't want anyone to get the misconception. We're not rezoning the property here tonight, just so everyone understands that. This is a special exception for the use. The property is already zoned for this. They're getting the special exception for the use. So we're not changing the zoning of the property. It's now zoned institutional. It'll continue to be zoned institutional. They're just getting the special exception for the use for the sober living facility. And it will stay with this property owner only.
So with that, I am going to call the vote. I just want to emphasize that, there's been a lot of great conversation today. That needs to continue moving forward, no matter the result of this vote, and it will continue. So with that said.
Mr. Chairman, before you call for that, I'd just like to clarify and get the second, whoever did the second, that my approval, or my motion for the approval of case 5 SE 19 with the adoption of the petitioner's findings as those of the board would apply only to the petitioner, and if the petitioner ever were to sell, that it would revert back to. So I amend my motion.
And a second as well.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that said, and with no more questions or comments from the petitioner, the staff, the audience, we have a motion and second before us. All those in favor of approving case 5 SE 19, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations.
Mr. Wyman, you might let your client know that he or she, they are moving into, well, they've gone through the first step. You have multiple steps. If they get to the end, they have a very passionate, well-founded neighborhood. We may not have the same neighborhood as a lot of places, but you've heard people say how many years they've been there. The shortest was 15 years, I think. So just let them know that, not in an adversarial way, but in a way that, we want to be able to say, yeah, they're part of our neighborhood. We say in Neighborhood Watch, keep your lights on. The more lights that are on, the less likely people are going to be out there doing trouble. And they don't like that well-lit area. And I agree with what you're saying. They prefer a vacant building, whether it's a church or the old store across the street. They prefer a vacant building as opposed to one with not only the literal lights on, but the symbolic light on as well. So,
Thank you all very much.
thank you.
Well, is there any other business before the board this evening?
I have no other business tonight, Mr. President.
Okay. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved.
That was a hard vote.